What's up, rail fans? I was going to do this video like I normally do with music and subtitles, but there's a lot going on in some of these pictures, so I thought it would be best if I did it with verbal exposition instead. So to get started, we're sitting in the engineer's seat of a -944CW, General Electric -944CW. And you can see, looking out the window, that is Grace-Dale Avenue in Mountaintop on the Reading and Northern. Actually, they call that Penobscot, Pennsylvania, but Penobscot, Mountaintop, whatever, it's all one relatively small area, so potato. We are in the engineer's seat, and you can see the desktop style controls, and off to the left you could see what I think that's the manifest, the train manifest. I can't remember, but this photo was taken back in 2004, so unfortunately I wasn't taking good notes like I do today, so a lot of things are a little bit fuzzy. But what exactly are we sitting in? Well, we're sitting in the cockpit of Santa Fe War Bonnet number 639, leading train 31T with the typical Canadian National Power, which was standard fare for this train. And check out that third unit. That's one of the old cowl bodies that Canadian National and CP had. I think we had some here in America too, didn't? Yeah, Santa Fe had some, and maybe Burlington Northern had some. So that they were a match made in heaven. But yeah, Burlington Northern had them. Burlington Northern, I think, inherited theirs from the Great Northern. But I'm getting off track here. Getting back to this. At this point now, we're at Solomon Gap, CP Solomon Gap, and the Santa Fe train, the 31T train with the Santa Fe War Bonnet leading, is moving northbound, getting ready to go into Solomon Gap. Now, looking on the horizon there, you can't really tell in this picture because this is kind of a low-quality scan, but you can see the nuclear power plant is off in the distance. On another day, we find ourselves in roughly the same spot. We're looking at Wisconsin Central SD45 number 7507, sandwiched between two Canadian National SD75Is. Now here we are in the cockpit of that SD75I, the lead SD75I, as a southbound Canadian Pacific train, probably on its way to Oak Island, New Jersey, by way of Allentown, is coming at us on track 1. We're sitting on track 2, but we got the Canadian Pacific coming southbound with a nice Sioux line 6011 leading the charge on today's train. We're now on the outside looking into Solomon's Gap, that is. We're at CP Solomon's Gap, and if you look down yonder there into the ravine, so be it, that's Solomon Gap. And if you look at that little overpass there, that's a popular spot for rail fans to shoot the trains coming underneath them. Now the bridge itself has been like closed off, but people still walk on it, so go figure. Up to the right, you see the Mountaintop Fire Department. This is what I was talking about when I said that Mountaintop and Penobscot are kind of the same thing. But I guess if you stand on one part of the mountain, you're in Mountaintop. You move a foot or two away, and you're in Penobscot. You know how that goes. But anyway, what do we have here? We have a Canadian National SD75I and a -944CW, both for Canadian National. That leads us to this shot right here. This is an early morning shot. Once again, it's 31T. Different day, though. Different crew, too. And we're inside a Canadian National SD40-2 as we're making our set out on that switch on that spur that I was telling you about that they have to make the set out on for the Reading and Northern. We're looking in the mirror. Now, I had a picture. I shouldn't say I had. I have a picture of the train itself, and I couldn't find it. I spent a half hour looking for it and can't find it. I still have a lot of stuff in storage, so I'm guessing that's where it's at. So you'll just have to take my word for it. We have a 3-unit lash up today. We have an SD40-2, -940CW, and an SD75I. Actually, looking at this picture, that might be the SD75I. Might be the second locomotive, but that's what we have. We have 2 EMDs and a D9. Here's the shot that I really wanted you to see. We are now in Solomon Gap, looking down, and you can see that bridge that I was talking about, the little overpass, the little pedestrian overpass. This is one of my favorite shots because this is the first and only time that I've actually ever been able to take a train down through Solomon Gap. This is engineer Dean Legursky, and he's piloting the Pocono Northeast. Well, it's not it was the Pocono Northeast. It's now the Luzerne Susquehanna, number 1701. This engine has a really interesting history behind it. It was originally a Pennsylvania Railroad engine, and then it became a Penn Central engine. By the time the Pocono Northeast bought it, if you're not familiar with the Pocono Northeast was a shortline railroad. It went out of business either in the late 80s or the early 90s. I believe it was the late 80s though, but it went out of business, and the L&S took over the operations. This is what it looked like when it was still lettered, or when it was still green and yellow, of the Pocono Northeast. It's since been repainted all black. The Luzerne Susquehanna has it now, and it's all black. Ironically, I've been trying for years to find this engine and shoot it in black and haven't been able to do it. I have not been able to get this engine in black yet, so I'll have to try to make it a point to do that this summer. We're back at Graysdale Avenue, and if you look over to the left, you can see the car I was driving at the time. That's one of those old kooky cars. It was a Nissan Stanza, dark blue Nissan Stanza. I say kooky cars because I have a knack for buying these rare cars that are hard to fix. They're hard to get parts for, but we're riding shotgun now in an EMD SD60 standard cab locomotive. Now, I believe that this was one of the Conrail acquired locomotives because the engineer control stand was on the right side of the locomotive like it should be. If you're not familiar with Norfolk Southern diesels, their SD60s, the ones that NS bought themselves, tended to be geared for long hood forward operations, so the controls in the cab were backwards. So you might see a train coming at you, you think you're waving at the conductor when you're actually waving at the engineer. But nonetheless, this is a very, very gloomy day, as you can see by the overcast there, and we're riding shotgun in this engine. Now, this is a picture that I remember all too well. There's a lot to absorb here. For starters, take a look at track 2 of the Reading and Northern. We're still on the Reading and Northern, by the way. We're now down at DuPont Junction, or we're just a couple hundred feet from DuPont Junction. We're about a quarter mile from DuPont, from the actual switch of DuPont Junction. This is where the Norfolk Southern trains today still wait when they're waiting for a signal to get onto the D&H. First of all, take a look at track 2. Notice how weed grown it is. It doesn't look like it's seeing much use. To credit the Reading and Northern, they've since rehabilitated that track, and both tracks are now in use, and they both look good. But that tree has fallen down over the tracks, which is why the 31T is stopped here. Looking at it from another angle, you can see how the tree is obscuring the track. I remember what the engineer said to me. He said, I could just plow right through it, but then I risked damage, so they had to call the Reading and Northern out, whose van that you can see there. And you can also notice that, if you haven't noticed by these pictures, the third unit is Union Pacific. It's a -8. I can't remember if it was a standard cab -8 or no, it was a wide cab. It was a wide cab, but it was a -8 nonetheless. There's not many of them left on Union Pacific. I know there were a few last year. There were a few hanging on, but there aren't many of them left. Here we are in the cab looking north. Again, we can see track 2, which is weed grown and rusted and not in use at this time, but like I said, it is now in use. And also take a look at the signal, that searchlight to the right. Now, if you come to this same spot today, that signal is further back. It's back past that tree, and it's a newer signal. This last shot you've seen before, you've seen at least twice before if you're a regular viewer of this channel, but there's one last thing I want to point out here. Now, you're not going to get a more classic-looking engineer than that, but you can't tell from this photo because, like I said, these are low-quality scans. But if I could show you the full-size photo, notice his hat. He has a lot of pins in his hat, and they're all Delaware and Hudson pins. I mean, this was a true Delaware and Hudson man. And like I said, his hat has all kinds of D&H pins in it. So I unfortunately didn't get a close-up of that. I wish I had now. I kind of regret that, but at the time I was so busy fanboying out just being in the locomotive cab, I didn't think much about it. Okay, well, that's it for this video. Let me know in the comments if you like these off-the-cuff, unscripted, little trips down memory lane, or if you like the more polished versions better. For Trains 21, call me AC.